High above the clouds, the Empire of Stonehaven drifted in silence, held up by ancient towers and glowing ley lines that ran through every wall, bridge, and temple. The sky was usually bright there, with white wind, blue distance, and golden light sliding across the floating streets, but that morning the whole city felt uneasy. Black sparks flickered inside the crystal rails, bells rang without being touched, and people kept looking up as if something unseen was moving between the clouds. Astra, a young woman with black hair, steady brown eyes, and a plain gray combat coat, stood on a balcony near the academy and watched the city tremble below her. She was a gravity wielder, which meant she could pull, lift, pin, and bend weight itself with careful focus, and she had spent years learning to control that gift. Astra wanted to protect people because she had grown up in the lower sky wards where weak families lived closest to the dangerous winds. What mattered most now was simple and clear: something was eating the ley lines, and if those lines failed, Stonehaven would fall out of the sky. The royal guards called the growing threat a wraith phenomenon, a hidden force that turned magic cold and empty before swallowing it whole, and nobody knew where it came from. Astra did not have time to be afraid, because the Empire needed answers before fear became a disaster. At the center of the city, inside the Hall of Ascension, the Crown Council gathered under glass panels that shone with storm light. Queen Evelyn, a woman with silver hair, a long blue mantle, and a calm face that hid deep worry, stood beside the royal throne and spoke with a voice that tried to sound strong. She explained that the ancient royal crown was not just a symbol of rule, but a seal connected to the balance of the ley lines themselves. Long ago, the first rulers had forged it to guide the 5 great forces of the Empire, and if it was used with wisdom, the crown could restore harmony when the world began to crack. But if someone used it with greed or fear, it could bend reality in terrible ways and turn the sky kingdoms into chaos. That was why the crown mattered, and that was why the rising wraiths terrified everyone. Astra listened carefully because she understood that the danger was not only outside the palace walls. Someone inside the Empire had to know more. The queen named the defenders one by one. Leo, a man with red hair and a fierce build, carried firepower and lived to charge into danger. Chloe, a woman with white hair and sharp ice magic, moved with cold grace and trusted almost no one. Max, a man with blonde hair and crackling lightning power, was quick, proud, and always ready to test himself against anyone. Vance, a man with black hair and dark void magic, served as a royal champion, but his quiet smile made him hard to trust. Then there was Myra, a woman with dark brown hair and forbidden blood magic, whose powers were banned by law because they could force living energy to obey in unnatural ways. Each champion wanted to prove that their element was the one the Empire needed most, and each one believed the others were a risk. Astra, by contrast, wanted only to stop the collapse, but the Queen surprised everyone by choosing her to lead the search. Astra was not the strongest fighter in the room, yet she was the best at reading motion, pressure, and balance. Queen Evelyn said that gravity was the one force that could bind the others together, and that made Astra the right person to face what was coming. Some courtiers approved, while others looked insulted, especially Vance and Myra, who both believed the crown should have chosen them. Astra felt the weight of their doubt, but she also felt the first hard truth of the crisis. The Empire was already splitting into pride, fear, and blame. The first attack came before sunrise, when a district near the lower bridges began to shake and dim. Astra rushed there with Leo, Chloe, and Max, while Queen Evelyn stayed behind to guard the crown chamber. As they crossed the wind lines, they saw the problem clearly. A wall of dark mist clung to the ley line towers, and from inside that mist came wraith shapes, thin and shifting like torn smoke, drawing power from the glowing channels until the light failed. Leo blasted fire at the mist and forced it back for a moment. Chloe froze the nearest tower braces so they would not snap under pressure. Max sent lightning through the rails to restart the flow. Astra then stepped forward, lifted both hands, and pulled gravity inward around the wraith cluster, compressing it until the shadow mass lost shape and scattered. For a breath, it seemed like they had won. Then the mist split open and a deeper force moved beneath it, as if the attack had been only a test. The wraiths slipped away across the rooftops, and a hidden mark was left burned into the stone, the sign of a crown with a broken circle beneath it. Astra stared at that mark and realized the attack had been guided, not random. Someone was feeding the wraiths a path into the Empire. That night, while the others debated defense plans, Astra followed the mark to a sealed archive under the old temple district. There she found records erased from the public history, and those records told a painful story. The The crown had once been made with all 5 major elements joined through gravity binding, because the Empire had learned that balance was stronger than any one force alone. But a high advisor named Damien had feared losing power, so he hid the full truth, split the old seal, and used secret blood rites to weaken the bond between the elements. He believed that if he controlled the crown, he could control the Empire. Instead, his actions had opened a wound in the ley lines, and from that wound the wraiths had begun to gather. The twist struck Astra hard. The enemy was not just a monster in the dark, the Empire itself had created the path for it. Palace, the conflict had grown far worse. Whole streets had gone dim, and floating bridges had begun to sag under unstable weight. Damien had revealed himself at last, standing in the royal tower with cold eyes, black armor, and a voice that never rose above a calm whisper. He was a man with black hair, silver rings on his gloves, and a hidden hunger for control that had shaped every lie he told. He said the Empire needed one ruler with absolute power, because unity without command was weakness, and the Wraith crisis proved his point. He had been using Myra in secret, promising her that blood magic would be respected if she helped him stabilize the crown, but he had never intended to honor that promise. Myra, shaken and angry, finally saw that Damien had used her fear of being cast out. She wanted her power to matter, not to become a tool for his rise. Vance, who had long served Damien in silence, stepped back in shock when he learned the true plan. Damien intended to use the royal crown at the Storm Nexus, a massive floating engine where all 5 ley lines crossed above the highest clouds. If he forced the crown open there, he could draw every elemental force into himself and remake the Empire in his image. But the same act would tear the sky wide and let the Wraith source flood everything. Astra confronted him, and the clash was instant. Leo hurled fire down the hallways. Chloe sealed doors with ice walls. Max shattered dark locks with lightning. Myra turned her own forbidden blood magic against Damien long enough to break his grip on the chamber. Yet Damien still reached the crown and triggered its pulse. The air folded, the floor buckled, and one of the palace towers tilted toward open sky. Astra saw that brute force alone would not solve this. The crown had once been built to unify the elements, not to crush them. She remembered the old records, the lost gravity seal, and the truth that balance had to be restored in the right order. So she made a choice that changed her forever. She called the others to trust one another, not their own pride. Leo fed fire into the crown pulse, Chloe shaped ice around the failing joints, Max carried lightning through the broken lines, Myra used careful blood magic to stabilize the living flow, and Astra pulled gravity around all of them, binding the powers into one steady ring. For the first time, the rival champions stopped fighting each other and moved as one team. Damien was driven back from the crown chamber, but the Storm Nexus had already begun to collapse, and the Wraith source above the clouds was still waking. Queen Evelyn arrived, pale but determined, and told Astra the last secret: the crown could seal the source only if someone carried its full burden through the storm core, where the ley lines met the wound in reality. That person would have to stay calm while the sky broke apart around them. Astra looked at the storm beyond the tower and understood that the real battle had only begun. She was no longer the girl who only wanted to protect the city from below. She had become the person who could hold the whole sky together, and as the Empire shuddered above the clouds, she stepped toward the open Storm Nexus with her allies at her side and the broken crown shining in her hands, ready to face whatever waited at the heart of the dark. Living thing, and the floating Empire shook under its own fear. Bright sky streets bent under flashes of white light, crystal rails hummed with strain, and ancient towers groaned as the ley lines below them twisted hard. At the center of that chaos, Astra stood with her allies closed behind her, and the broken royal crown in her hands seemed to pulse with a weak and frightened glow. Astra was a young woman with black hair, brown eyes, and a plain gray combat coat that no longer looked ordinary at all. She had once only wanted to protect the city below, but now she understood that the whole sky depended on her calm hands and steady heart. Beside her stood Queen Evelyn, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, blue eyes, and a long blue royal mantle over a white ceremonial dress, her gold crown frame bent but still shining with duty. Queen Evelyn wanted one simple thing more than anything else, and that was to keep Stonehaven alive without turning it into a cage. Leo, a young man with red hair, amber eyes, and a dark red battle jacket with flame patterns, leaned forward with his bold, aggressive stance, ready to rush into danger before anyone else could stop him. Chloe, a young woman with white hair, pale blue eyes, and a pale blue cloak over silver armor accents, watched the storm with a cool, guarded face, because control mattered to her as much as victory. Max, a young man with blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a black and gold combat outfit with lightning trim, kept shifting on his boots, eager to prove he could move faster than the fear around him. Vance, a man with black hair, gray eyes, and dark layered robes under a shadow-colored cloak, stayed quiet at the edge because he knew secrets had weight, and he wanted to keep control of the worst ones. Myra, a woman with dark brown hair, green eyes, and a deep crimson tunic with wrapped armbands, held herself tight, because her forbidden blood magic had always made her feel like a risk. Their enemy was Damien, a man with black hair, cold brown eyes, black armor, and a dark royal sash, whose face stayed calm even while the sky broke apart. Damien wanted absolute control over Stonehaven because he believed a perfect empire had to obey one mind, one plan, and one will. He had helped hide the true nature of the crown for years, and now he meant to use the storm to force everyone into his rule. If the crown failed, the Sky Empire would collapse and every street, tower, and temple rooftop would be lost to the clouds below. Astra stepped forward first, and the others followed her into the open storm nexus. Like a giant wound in the sky, it floated in a wide hollow of dark clouds where broken arcs of light crossed and snapped around a spinning core of pressure and thunder. The air felt heavy, and every step across the narrow platform shook like a drum. Astra could feel the pull of the place in her bones, as if the sky itself wanted to test whether she was strong enough to hold it together. Queen Evelyn lifted her chin and looked at the crown in Astra hands, then at the storm core ahead. She spoke with a tired but clear voice, and the truth in it made everyone listen. The crown was not only a symbol of rule. Long ago, the first rulers of Stonehaven built it as a device to bind the elemental forces that kept the empire floating. The 5 faint gemstone channels in its gold ring were designed to open and close the flow of power through the ley lines below the city. But when the inner seal broke, the crown could no longer work as planned. That was why the sky had begun to crack. That was why the storm nexus was growing worse each hour. Damien had known this for years, and he had hidden the truth because he feared that if the public learned how fragile the empire really was, the people would panic and the royal house would lose power. He wanted control so badly that he was willing to let everyone live inside a lie. Max stared at him with open anger, and Leo almost launched himself forward, but Astra raised one hand and stopped them. She did not need a loud fight yet, she needed answers. Damien smiled a small, cold smile and stepped into the light of the storm. He said the empire did not need hope, only order. He said one ruler with absolute command could guide Stonehaven forever, while freedom would only cause ruin. His motive made terrible sense in a twisted way, and that was what made him dangerous. He was not acting like a wild monster. He was acting like a man who believed control was mercy. Then he reached toward the crown, and the storm answered him with a violent shock that sent sparks through the air. Chloe threw up a wall of cold pressure to shield the group. Myra formed a trembling crimson field that held the pressure back, and Vance pulled a veil of darkness around their feet so they would not slip off the platform. The storm nexus thundered louder, and the first real battle began. Because panic would have thrown everyone into the void. She stepped between Damien and the crown, and she used her gravity power to pin the shifting air in place around the core. The whole platform shuddered, but for one clear moment, the storm slowed. Leo rushed to the left and sent a wave of fire across a broken lightning bridge, forcing Damien guards to retreat from the edge. Max dashed through the bright crackles of energy, fast enough to draw the storm charge away from Astra hands, and he shouted that the east channel was about to burst. Chloe answered him at once, freezing the unstable moisture in the air and sealing the channel long enough for the pressure to settle. Vance moved like a shadow through the shaking light, and he found the hidden support ring beneath the storm platform, the one that should have been there all along. That discovery changed everything. The crown had not failed by accident. Someone had removed part of the support structure from the Nexus, and that someone had to know exactly how to weaken the Empire without destroying it right away. Myra saw the same pattern in the storm lines, and her face turned pale. Her blood magic responded to living power, and the storm core felt not empty, but trapped. She whispered that something inside the Nexus was feeding on fear and pressure, not just lightning. Queen Evelyn turned slowly and her worried face became harder than Astra had ever seen. She realized Damien had not only hidden the crown truth, he had also arranged the damage in a way that made him look necessary. If the Empire kept failing, the people would beg for the strongest hand. Damien had been building his excuse all along. Then the biggest revelation hit Astra like a cold blade of understanding. The broken crown was not only a lock. It was also a key, and the 5 gemstone channels were meant to work together with the living choices of the ruler who wore it. The crown did not respond to force alone. It responded to intent. If someone wanted control, the crown would tighten and strain the storm. If someone wanted to protect, it would open the path and balance the power. That was why Damien had never been able to fully activate it. He wanted domination, but the crown was built for responsibility. Astra understood at once that this was why Queen Evelyn had trusted her. Not because Astra was the strongest, but because she was the one person in the group who had learned to protect without grasping. Damien saw the change in her face and his calm cracked for the first time. He lunged toward her, demanding the crown because he knew his last chance was slipping away. The storm answered his anger and the Nexus began to split wider, sending hard wind across the platform. A section of the outer ring collapsed behind them, and the path back toward the tower vanished into the cloud glow. The stakes rose at once. If Astra failed now, Stonehaven would lose its balance, the royal line would fall, and the Empire would break apart in the sky. The allies were trapped, and the storm was no longer just a threat, it was a choice. Evelyn, and she finally understood what kind of leader the Empire needed. She was not being asked to rule by fear, she was being asked to carry trust. She stepped toward the storm core, lifted the broken crown, and placed both hands around it as the 5 empty channels began to wake. The crown burned cold at first, then warm, then bright. Astra closed her eyes, breathed slowly, and let her gravity power settle the storm instead of fighting it. She did not force the Nexus down, she gave it a place to rest. Queen Evelyn spoke the old binding words, not as a command, but as a promise to protect. Chloe held the cold edge of the storm in place. Leo kept the burning pressure from spreading. Max guided the lightning paths into clean lines. Vance held the shadows steady so the platform would not slip. Myra, trembling but brave, used her blood magic to sense the living pulse inside the crown and guide the final connection. Together, they made a circle of trust around Astra, and the crown answered at last. The storm core began to settle, and for one breathless moment, the sky went quiet. Then Damien acted one last time, throwing himself toward the crown with desperate force. He was not trying to save the Empire anymore. He was trying to take the proof of his failure and turn it into a weapon of blame. Astra saw it in time. She opened her eyes, raised one hand, and used the full precision of her gravity power to lock Damien in place without harming him. He struggled, furious and shocked, but he could not move. The storm towered above them, and then the hidden support ring Vance had found snapped back into place with a deep ringing sound. The crown flashed, the 5 channels filled with light, and the storm Nexus began to heal. But the victory did not feel complete yet, because the far side of the core still pulsed with a strange dark mark, as if someone or something else had touched the system long before Damien ever came here. Astra stared at that mark, and her calm face changed into a focused, uneasy look. Queen Evelyn saw it too, and she knew at once that this was not the end of the danger. Damien had been defeated for the moment, but he had not been the first hand on the broken crown. Someone else had started this long before him, and that hidden truth was now waking inside the storm. The Empire steadied, the Allies held their ground, and the sky did not fall, but Astra knew the battle had only revealed a deeper shadow waiting ahead. As the repaired crown glowed in her hands and the storm Nexus slowly quieted, she took one last look into the dark heart of the cloud wall, ready for the next truth that would come from it, because Stonehaven was safe for now, and yet nowhere near finished. Tense silence, and the whole Empire felt like it was holding its breath. Bright sky streets curved between crystal rails, ancient towers rose through mist, and temple rooftops flashed under a weak silver light. The repaired royal crown still glowed in Astra hands, and the storm Nexus above the city slowly quieted, but no one there believed the danger had truly ended. Astra was a young woman with black hair, brown eyes, and a plain gray combat coat, and she stood with calm focus because she knew the storm had only shown the first layer of a much deeper threat. Queen Evelyn, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, blue eyes, and a long blue royal mantle, watched the dark cloud wall with heavy worry. because she wanted to protect her people without breaking under fear. Leo, a young man with red hair, amber eyes, and a dark red battle jacket with flame patterns, paced like a spark ready to jump because he wanted action and hated waiting. Chloe, a young woman with white hair, pale blue eyes, and a pale blue cloak with silver armor accents, stayed still beside the rail because she wanted control and knew panic could ruin everything. Max, a young man with blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a black and gold combat outfit, kept glancing toward the storm because he wanted to prove he could outrun any danger. Vance, a man with black hair, gray eyes, and dark layered robes, stood in the shadow of a tower arch because he wanted to keep secrets from becoming weapons in the wrong hands. Myra, a woman with dark brown hair, green eyes, and a deep crimson tunic, held her wrapped arms tight because she feared the forbidden blood magic inside her, yet she also knew it might be needed now. Damien, a man with black hair, cold brown eyes, and black armor with silver rings, had already moved into the inner halls because he wanted full control of Stonehaven and believed fear would save the Empire better than trust. The central problem was now clear to everyone who mattered. The storm was not random, the crown was not only a symbol, and the Empire was not safe just because the sky had stopped shaking. If the truth behind the storm nexus stayed buried, Stonehaven could be torn apart from the inside, and Damien was ready to use that fear to take the throne of influence for himself. And the 5 faint gemstone channels along its rim caught the light like sleeping eyes opening one by one. Queen Evelyn stepped closer and spoke in a low voice, saying the crown had been made long ago to bind elemental forces and keep the Empire balanced above the clouds. She explained that the broken circular seal under the crown was not a decoration but a lock, and that the lock had once kept a buried power from waking inside the storm nexus. The idea was simple and frightening at the same time. The crown did not just rule Stonehaven, it helped hold the city in place, and if its seal was damaged in the wrong way, the storm could answer with force no one could control. Astra listened carefully because she had already felt that strange pull in the storm, like something old and angry had looked back at her. Then Leo pointed toward the inner corridors and said Damien had been asking too many questions for too long. Chloe added that he had been sending guards away from key platforms, which meant he had been trying to shape the city before the city even knew it was in danger. Max clenched his gloves and said Damien wanted the crown because he believed only one hard hand could keep everyone safe. Vance did not deny it, which made the air colder. He finally said that Damien had been collecting records from the old archive, looking for the original design of the crown and the storm nexus. That was the first sharp twist in the dark truth. Damien was not simply trying to seize power in the normal way. He believed the Empire was already unstable, and he thought the hidden system under Stonehaven could be used as a chain to force every district, every tower, and every champion into obedience. To him, order mattered more than freedom, and fear was the price he was willing to make everyone pay. Before anyone could answer, a deep pulse rolled through the floor, and a hidden section of the sky bridge shivered open like a wound beginning to spread. The central tower, and the group moved there fast because the storm had started reacting again. The walls were lined with faded maps, cracked mirrors, and metal rings that once helped guide the ley lines through the city. Astra stepped ahead with the crown held close, and the glow from its broken seal cast thin gold lines across the room. In the center stood a giant black glass frame, and inside it floated a dim image of the storm nexus, wrapped in swirling gray clouds. Then the image changed. A second shape appeared behind the storm core, a shape like a hand built from dark light, and everyone in the room went still. Queen Evelyn looked sick with understanding because she knew what the image meant before anyone else spoke. Long ago, during the first raising of Stonehaven, a hidden caretaker had sealed a dangerous core spirit inside the storm nexus, not to destroy it, but to keep it from feeding on the Empire's own power lines. The spirit had been tied to emotion, fear, and command, and whenever people around Stonehaven grew divided, it would wake a little more. That explained why the storm had sharpened each time Damien spread rumors, tightened control, and pushed people to choose sides. The more fear he created, the stronger the storm became. This was the second twist, and it changed everything. Damien was not only chasing power, he was unknowingly feeding the very force that could swallow the Empire. Yet the room also revealed something else. The old caretaker had left a warning carved beneath the frame, and it said the crown could heal the seal only if it was held by someone who ruled with protection instead of control. Astra read those words with steady eyes, and for the first time, she understood why the crown had chosen to glow in her hands instead of Evelyn's hands. Queen Evelyn was the rightful ruler, but Astra was the one who could carry the crown through danger without letting fear guide her. The others looked at her, and she felt the weight of that trust settle on her shoulders like cold stone. Outside the chamber, another pulse shook the tower, stronger this time, and a guard ran in shouting that Damien had sealed the lower routes and taken control of the west lift to the storm platform. He was moving now not because he had won, but because he feared losing control before he could understand the full truth. She gave the crown back to Queen Evelyn for one short moment so the queen could confirm the old seal pattern, and then the two of them agreed on a plan that matched both duty and courage. Evelyn would stay with the city and keep the people calm because her voice still carried the heart of Stonehaven. Astra would lead the others to the storm platform because the crown had already answered her and the Nexus was calling her back. Leo grinned and said he would break every lock between them and the tower top. Chloe said she would freeze the moving chains that guarded the lift. Max said he would race ahead and clear the path. Vance said he would watch the shadows and look for hidden routes, and Myra quietly said she would come too, because if the storm spirit fed on fear, then her blood magic might help bind what the crown could not reach alone. That was the moment Astra changed inside. She was no longer only the careful fighter who wanted to protect from the edge of the battle. She had become the one who had to lead with trust, even when the truth was still incomplete. The group moved through the inner stairs and came into a huge sky chamber where the west lift stood under cracked arches and cold wind. Damien waited there with several armored guards, his face calm and hard, and his voice carried the cold certainty of a man who thought mercy was weakness. He said the crown should be placed under his control because the Empire needed one will, one law, and one command. He said Queen Evelyn was too gentle, and Astra was too reckless, and the others were too divided to hold the city together. But when he reached for the crown, the storm above answered him with a violent flash that made the whole chamber shake. The dark hand inside the Nexus rose again, larger now, because Damien words had fed it. A deep wave of pressure crashed down, forcing everyone back, and the lift chains groaned as the entire platform began to tilt toward the open sky. Astra stepped forward, planted her boots, and held the crown at chest height while she focused on the broken seal. Her voice stayed calm, and she told Damien that control built on fear only made the storm stronger. Then she asked him one simple question, and it cut through him more than any strike could. If he truly wanted to save Stonehaven, why was he helping the storm wake up? For the first time, Damien hesitated. He did not answer because some part of him knew the truth and hated it. That silence mattered. It meant he was not acting from pure evil, but from a damaged belief that order could only be made through pressure and force. The storm spirit surged again, the chamber lights exploded into white glare, and Myra stepped forward with trembling hands, ready to use the forbidden magic she had tried so hard to hide. Astra looked back once at Queen Evelyn far below in the lit city, then forward at her friends, and she understood the road ahead had only opened wider. The crown began to glow brighter, the seal lines started to shift, and the old warning in the chamber suddenly felt like the first clue in a much larger trap. The Empire was still standing, the Allies were still united, and the sky had not fallen, but the next truth was now awake inside the storm, waiting for the right moment to strike back. A city made from light, stone, and careful hope, with bright sky streets crossing between crystal rails and ancient towers that never stopped glowing. The wind moved through the temple rooftops with a low, steady hum, and the ley lines beneath the streets pulsed like quiet veins of fire. Below it all, the world looked far away and small, but that only made the danger feel larger because a single mistake here could shake the whole empire. Astra stood at the edge of a high stone platform with the royal crown held before her, and she felt its warm light push against her hands like a living warning. She was a young woman with black hair, brown eyes, and a plain gray combat coat, and she had the calm face of someone who knew fear could not be allowed to lead. Beside her stood Queen Evelyn, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, blue eyes, and a long blue royal mantle over a white ceremonial dress, and she carried the weight of the empire in every careful breath. The queen wanted Stonehaven to stay united, safe, and whole, because if the crown failed, the floating city could lose balance and fall apart over the open sky. Around them were the others who mattered now, each of them drawn into this storm by choice and by duty. Leo, a young man with red hair, amber eyes, and a dark red battle jacket with flame patterns, paced like a spark ready to burst. Chloe, a young woman with white hair, pale blue eyes, and a pale blue cloak over silver armor accents, watched the crown with cool focus, always searching for the smallest detail. Max, a young man with blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a black and gold combat outfit, tapped one boot against the floor with restless energy. Vance, a man with black hair, gray eyes, and dark layered robes under a shadow-colored cloak, stayed quiet and tense, as if he was listening to things no one else could hear. Myra, a woman with dark brown hair, green eyes, and a deep crimson tunic under a fitted travel cloak, kept her hands close to her sides, because the blood magic inside her made every strange pulse in the crown feel personal. They all knew the central problem now, and it was no longer simple. The crown was not only a sign of royal rule, because it was also part of an old system that held the empire steady above the clouds. If its seals broke, the storm nexus high above could twist out of control, the sky roots could collapse, and the whole floating kingdom could be thrown into chaos. That was why the glow in Astra hands mattered so much, and why the warning from the chamber sounded less like a threat now and more like a map to a hidden trap. And her voice stayed steady even as worry sat behind it. She said the crown had responded to the storm before, but never this fast and never with this much force. She had learned about the crown from old royal records, locked away because the truth had once seemed too dangerous for the public. Long ago, the first rulers of Stonehaven built the crown to bind the empire to the ley lines and keep the floating land stable, but they hid a second layer inside it, a secret seal meant to shut down any ruler who tried to use the empire as a weapon. That second layer was the reason the crown now glowed so strongly, because someone had been trying to wake its hidden functions for months. Astra looked from the queen to the crown and then to the shifting seal lines beneath it, and she understood that this was no accident. Damien had been here all along, close to the center of power, calm and polite, always speaking like he served the empire. But his true motive was now clearer than ever. He wanted total control, not just over the throne, but over the entire city and its energy lines, because a floating empire under fear could be ruled more easily than one held together by trust. He believed Evelyn was too careful, too gentle, and too tied to the people, and he wanted a system that obeyed his commands without question. That was why he had moved quietly, making people doubt the queen, stirring fear among the council, and searching for the part of the crown that could turn stability into obedience. Astra felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm because she knew panic would only help Damien. She asked what the crown wanted now, and Chloe answered first, saying the crown was acting like a key that had found the wrong lock. The seal lines were not breaking yet, but they were shifting toward a pattern that matched the storm nexus above the clouds. That meant someone had already tuned the empire to answer a hidden signal. Max swore under his breath and said they should go straight up before Damien could do anything else. Vance, however, lifted one hand and said the path was already dangerous because the void currents around the storm nexus were unstable and full of old defense wards. His quiet words made everyone listen. Myra then admitted something that changed the mood in the room. She had felt a strange pull in her own magic since the crown began to glow, and she had first thought it was only fear. Now she believed the crown and her blood magic were linked through the same old design, because both were tied to life force, balance, and control. That was the first twist that sharpened the whole story. The crown was not just reacting to the storm. It was recognizing the one person who could open or close the seal from the inside. And Myra, the one everyone had feared because of her forbidden power, might be the only person able to survive the crown long enough to reach the truth.
She told the others they would go to the storm nexus before Damien could fully trigger whatever he had prepared, and Queen Evelyn agreed even though it was painful to send them away. The queen knew her place was still here, inside the city, keeping the people calm and stopping panic from spreading through the sky streets. She was not a woman who ran from duty, and that made her matter just as much as the heroes climbing into the storm.
Stonehaven hung high above the clouds, and the whole city shivered under a deep and restless sky. Lantern wards still glowed below with warm windows, but every family there knew the danger now because the storm above had grown into a living wound. Far beyond the streets, Bell's spire rang in sharp, uneasy tones, while the storm nexus churned like a giant eye of thunder. Astra stood at the edge of the platform near the broken royal seal, holding the ancient crown in both hands, and she finally understood the truth that had been pressing on her since the first signs of collapse. This was not only a fight against Damien. This was a fight for the whole balance of Stonehaven, and the crown itself was part of the problem and the answer. Queen Evelyn had told them the crown once kept the floating empire steady by guiding the 5 elemental lines, but those lines had been cut off and twisted long ago by fear, greed, and secret control. If the crown failed now, the city could break apart in the sky. If Damien got it, he could force the empire into a single hard order and silence every voice that stood against him. Astra felt that threat clearly, and because of that, she stepped forward with calm eyes and a steady body, ready to do what one person alone could not do. The storm still hung over Stonehaven like a giant warning, and the floating empire looked smaller than ever beneath it. Lantern lights trembled in Lantern Ward, where families watched from narrow walkways and held each other close. Bellspire rang in sharp, nervous notes, and every sound seemed to climb into the same wild air that fed the storm nexus. Astra stood on the edge of the platform high above the city, with Queen Evelyn, Leo, Chloe, Max, Vance, Myra, and Captain Nora beside her, while Damien waited across the broken span with cold eyes and a raised hand. The royal crown glowed between them, and everyone knew the same hard truth. If the crown failed, the storm would tear the empire apart, and if Damien won, Stonehaven would survive only as a prison of fear. Damien lifted both hands, and the air around the broken span tightened as if it feared him. The crown answered with a deep golden pulse, and the broken seal under it flickered like a hidden eye opening for the first time. Queen Evelyn took one step forward and spoke with a clear voice that carried across the gap. She said that the crown had never belonged to Damien, and that he had been using fear to hide the truth. That truth landed like a blade of light. The crown was not only a symbol of rule, it was a lock. Long ago, the rulers of Stonehaven built it to bind the 5 elemental channels that fed the floating empire and to keep the storm nexus from waking fully. The broken seal beneath the crown had been created as a safety measure, because if the crown was forced open by anger or greed, the storm would react and grow stronger. Damien had known this. He had hidden the danger from the council, because he believed the people would panic if they learned the empire rested on a damaged seal. He wanted to keep control long enough to rebuild the system his own way, even if that meant pushing everyone into obedience. That was the first revelation, and it made the air feel colder. It also explained why the storm had grown each time Damien fed it force. He was not calming the storm, he was pressing on a wound. The sky above Stonehaven had turned almost black, and the floating empire seemed to hold its breath beneath the storm. Warm lanterns still glowed in Lantern Ward, and bright crystal rails still ran through the streets, but fear now lived in every window and every doorway. High above the cloud line, the storm nexus rolled and twisted like a wounded giant, and each pulse from it shook the whole city with a deep, uneasy hum. Below that storm, people still worked, still prayed, and still watched the sky with hope and dread mixed together, because they all knew the same simple truth. If the crown could not steady the empire, Stonehaven would fall apart piece by piece, and everyone who lived there would lose the world they had built in the air. Queen Evelyn lifted the royal crown from its velvet support, and the gold frame caught the storm light in sharp flashes. The ancient crown had 5 faint gemstone channels and a broken circular seal hidden beneath the rim, a design that had once been told as a symbol of rule, but never fully explained. Now Evelyn spoke the truth in a calm but heavy voice, because the city needed truth more than ceremony. Long ago, the crown had not only marked the ruler of Stonehaven. It had been built to bind the elemental forces that fed the floating empire, and the broken seal beneath it was not a flaw. It was a warning. The crown could steady the empire only if the rulers shared power with the champions who carried the city through storm, flame, frost, lightning, shadow, and blood. Damien had hidden that fact because he wanted the crown to serve one ruler, one voice, and one law. He believed that divided power would bring chaos, and he wanted to rule before chaos could rule everyone else. That was why he had pushed so hard, why he had twisted fear into obedience, and why he had tried to turn the storm into proof that only he should lead. Before anyone could answer, Captain Nora arrived with 2 guards behind her, her dark hair pinned beneath her polished captain helm, her brown eyes stern but restless. She had served the city with discipline for years, and she had followed orders because she believed order kept people safe. Yet now she had seen too much to stay blind. She bowed to the queen, then looked straight at Astra and the others. She said that Damien had ordered the western sky bridges sealed and had sent loyal guards toward Bell Spire, where the storm signal towers still rang across the city. He wanted to isolate each district, cut off the champions from one another, and force the crown into his hands while everyone else stayed trapped below. That was the moment the danger became clear in full. If Damien reached Bell Spire first, he could use the tower chimes and the crown together to send false command signals through Stonehaven, and the city would obey a lie long enough for him to take control. The people in Lantern Ward would be left helpless, the upper towers would lose their links, and the storm nexus above the clouds would become a weapon instead of a shield. Astra felt the weight of that truth settle in her chest, and then she did the one thing she had never done before. She asked for help. The team moved at once, and the city became a path of urgent motion and sharp danger. Leo ran ahead through the narrow sky walkways, fire building around his fists as he smashed open frozen barriers that had locked the route. Chloe followed beside him, her pale blue cloak snapping in the wind as she cooled broken rails and held the path steady with sheets of ice that stopped the platforms from shaking apart. Max flashed across the bridges in bursts of lightning speed, carrying messages to the guard posts and pulling trapped workers from collapsing ledges before panic could spread. Vance moved in the shadows under broken archways, his dark cloak blending with the low light as he slipped through hidden routes that only he seemed to know. Myra walked close to the center, her hands trembling at first, then steadying as she used forbidden blood magic in small, careful pulses to sense where the storm pressure was rising and where wounded power still lingered in the stone. Queen Evelyn stayed with Astra not because she was weak, but because the crown would respond only if the ruler stood close to the one who could shape gravity and join the others together. Together, they pushed toward Bell Spire, and every step showed the same lesson in a new form. Alone, each of them could be cornered. Together, they could move like one living plan. Bell Spire rose ahead of them, tall and bright, its glass sides catching flashes from the storm as if lightning lived inside the tower. The chimes there were usually a comfort to the city because their sound carried warnings, announcements, and comm signals across Stonehaven. But now the tower sang in broken notes and the wrong signals were already slipping into the air. Damien stood on the highest landing, his black hair slicked back by the wind, his cold brown eyes fixed on the crown with hard control. He wore black armor with silver rings on his gloves, and his dark royal sash moved behind him like a blade of shadow. He did not look wild or angry. He looked certain. He told the others that Stonehaven was already weak, that the storm would keep growing, and that people needed one rule, one voice, and one master. He said fear was useful because fear made people obey, and obedience was the only thing that could keep a floating empire from tearing itself apart. Astra heard the logic in his words, and that made him more dangerous, not less. He was not trying to destroy Stonehaven for pride. He was trying to cage it so tightly that no one could choose freedom again. The clash at Bell Spire was fierce, fast, and full of moving light. Leo struck first, fire driving Damien back from the crown stand, while Chloe locked the lower landing in ice so the guards could not rush the platform from behind. Max cut through the side bridge with lightning speed and severed the false signal lines before they could spread farther into the city. Vance spread his shadow power across the tower doors, closing hidden paths and trapping Damien where he could be faced at last. Myra then stepped forward, frightened but steady, and used her blood magic to reveal the true pattern inside the crown channels. What she found changed everything. The crown had been made to work with more than one kind of power, but its final seal had been cracked on purpose by an earlier ruler who feared losing control. Damien was not the first person to hunger for command. He was only the latest one to believe that fear was safer than trust. That truth hit Evelyn hard because she now saw that the crown had been broken by the same kind of thinking that Damien carried in his heart. Astra climbed the last steps of the landing while the storm rumbled overhead, and she did not rush this time. She looked at Damien, then at her friends, then at Queen Evelyn, and she chose a different kind of strength. She planted her feet, spread her hands, and used gravity not to crush but to bind. She pulled the crown into the center of the circle, where Leo, Chloe, Max, Vance, and Myra could each feed it their own power in one shared pattern. The royal crown flared with gold light, the gemstone channels woke one by one, and the broken seal beneath it opened like a hidden eye. In that instant, the storm nexus above the clouds answered. It did not come at once, but it stopped growing wild. The tower chimes rang true again, and the false signal lines shattered in a clean burst of light. Damien tried to force his way through, but the combined force of the group pushed him back step by step until he could no longer hold the platform. He stood stunned, not beaten forever, but clearly overmatched by the thing he had never understood. He had tried to rule fear while they had chosen trust. The storm above Stonehaven still churned, and the danger was not gone, but the city had been given a chance to breathe. Captain Nora ordered the guards to reopen the bridges and protect the districts instead of sealing them. People in Lantern Ward looked up and saw the tower lights return in the right pattern, and hope spread through the windows one home at a time. Queen Evelyn held the crown in both hands, and for the first time she did not look like a woman carrying a burden alone. She looked like a ruler who had finally remembered that rule meant responsibility, not control. Astra stood beside her, breathing hard, changed in a way that could not be hidden. She had begun this fight believing that strength meant standing apart and never needing help. Now she knew better. Strength meant knowing when to trust others, when to share the weight, and when to let the whole group become something larger than any single person. Above them, the storm nexus still glowed with restless power, and Damien was already watching from the broken edge of Bell Spire, his mind turning toward his next move. The battle was not over, but the heart of Stonehaven had shifted, and the future had moved one step away from fear and one step closer to hope. Stonehaven drifted above the clouds like a city built on a secret promise, and the sky around it still shimmered with angry light. Lantern Ward glowed below with warm windows and shaky lanterns, while Bell Spire stood ahead like a wounded giant with broken chimes. High above both places, the storm nexus pulsed with restless power, and every pulse sent a low tremor through the floating streets. People could feel that the city was still at risk, and they knew one hard truth very well. If the storm core broke free, Stonehaven would lose its balance, and the whole empire could fall into ruin. Damien watched from the broken edge of Bell Spire with black hair, cold brown eyes, black armor with silver rings on the gloves, and a dark royal sash hanging like a warning. He looked calm, but his mind moved with cold speed. He wanted control not because he enjoyed chaos, but because he believed the Empire only survived when one hand guided everything. The Storm Nexus had once been linked to the royal crown, and Damien had learned that the crown was not only a symbol of rule. It was also a hidden device built long ago to bind elemental forces and hold the city in balance. That truth mattered now more than ever because the broken seal under the crown had begun to loosen and the device was failing under the strain of the storm. Damien believed Queen Evelyn had hidden the full truth to protect the throne, and he believed that weakness had nearly destroyed the Empire. So he planned to seize the crown, seize the storm power, and force Stonehaven into order by his own design. He was not acting from madness. He was acting from a twisted belief that fear could be ended only by absolute control. Queen Evelyn stepped forward first, and her voice carried clearly over the wind. She told the group that the crown could still stabilize the Nexus if they could reach the upper ring of the spire and complete the binding sequence. But she also admitted the part she had hidden for too long. The royal crown had 5 gemstone channels, and each one had once accepted the force of an elemental champion. The system had been built for balance, not for one ruler to command alone. Years ago, she had kept that truth buried because she feared greedy hands would use it to rule the city through force. Damien had found pieces of the old record, and he had spent years preparing to bend that hidden power to his will. The revelation hit the group hard because it made the danger plain. The crown was not just a relic. It was a lock, and if the wrong person opened it, the entire storm could be turned into a weapon. Astra listened in silence, and for the first time she saw the full shape of the fight. They were not only stopping a man. They were choosing what kind of city Stonehaven would become. Then Captain Nora made her choice. She looked at the storm, looked at Queen Evelyn, and finally looked at the people gathered around the bridge. Her duty had always been to protect the city, but now she understood that true protection meant facing the truth, even when the truth upset power. She ordered the nearby guards to clear the upper walkways and open a path through the Bell Spire lanes. Some guards obeyed at once while others hesitated, afraid to go against old orders. Nora did not force them with anger. She spoke with steady firmness, and that gave them courage. At the same time, Myra stepped forward and admitted that her blood magic could help guide the crown, even though she had spent so long fearing what others might think of her. Her power was dangerous only when hidden and feared, because the old binding circles required a living line of force to complete the seal. Chloe added that cold control could steady the channel, Max said his speed could carry the power signals between the rings, Leo said his fire could push back the storm surges, and Vance said he could hold the shadow gaps where the storm light flickered and opened holes. Astra saw it then. This was no longer one leader carrying everyone. This was a group becoming stronger together. The climb began inside Bell's Spire, where glass walls reflected storm light in broken bands and narrow bridges shook under every step. Chimes rang from the tower lines, but their sound came out uneven and strained, as if the whole place was breathing through a crack. Astra led the way with measured steps, using her gravity power with careful precision to steady loose panels and keep the team from sliding off the shifting floor. Leo burned bright beside her, forcing back waves of cold wind that burst through the broken arches. Chloe sent sharp chills into the air to calm the storm's sparks, and Max moved between them like a lightning flash, checking every path and relaying quick warnings. Vance stayed close to the stone edges, pulling shadow around weak seams so the storm could not open them wider, while Myra carried the worst burden of all. Her power had to touch the crown when they reached it, and that meant she had to trust the others to guard her when the moment came. The tension rose with every level because the storm nexus above them grew louder and Damien kept testing them from a distance. He sent shadowed blasts through hidden routes, forcing the team to split and regroup, and every clash made it clear that he knew the tower almost as well as they did. At one landing, the team found a chamber where the old crown stand had been smashed open. Inside lay the royal crown itself, its gold surface dim under storm glare, its 5 gemstone channels faint but still alive. Queen Evelyn reached toward it, but Astra stopped her with a calm hand because she could see the old fear in the Queen's face. Evelyn had carried the burden of secrecy for years, and it had nearly isolated her from the very people she meant to protect. Now she had to let others share the weight, so she stepped back, nodded once, and let Myra take her place beside the crown stand. That moment changed the room. It changed the group. Myra trembled at first because she knew how dangerous her gift could be, but she also knew she would not be standing alone. Chloe placed a steady hand on one side of the binding ring. Leo grounded the far channel with a flare of heat. Max sent a bright pulse through the signal points. Vance sealed the darkness around the stand, and Astra drew the whole circle into balance with the quiet pull of gravity. The crown lit up slowly, then brighter, and the broken seal beneath it began to close. For a brief moment, hope returned to the room like sunlight through storm clouds. That was when Damien revealed his deeper plan. He did not want the storm nexus simply for power. He wanted it because the crown was tied to the citywide ley lines, and whoever held the core could control every ward, every bridge, and every guard path in Stonehaven. He had intended to force the Empire into obedience by cutting off any district that resisted him, starting with Lantern Ward, where the families already feared the sky was turning against them. The revelation struck harder than any attack because now everyone understood the true scale of his ambition. He did not want a throne, he wanted a cage. He emerged at the upper rise of Bell's Spire just as the crown began to glow, and his voice carried across the chamber with cold certainty. He told them that freedom without order was only another kind of collapse, and that he would save the Empire from itself if they would not kneel willingly. Astra answered him without shouting. She said that a city built on fear could not last, and that the people of Stonehaven deserved more than chains dressed as safety. Damien attacked the chamber with a surge of dark force, and the whole upper level shuddered. The crown stand cracked under the pressure, and the storm nexus above flashed so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. Leo moved first, throwing himself into the clash with a burst of fire that forced Damien back a step. Chloe froze the floor edge to slow the next wave, Max darted in to redirect the storm's sparks, and Vance folded the shadows around Damien to limit his sight. Myra then did the hardest thing of all. She stepped fully into the binding circle and opened her power without hiding from it, letting the red current join the crown channels. The crown blazed, the seal beneath it locked with a deep pulse, and Astra felt the gravity of the whole chamber settle into place. Damien tried to break through one more time, but the group met him together, and their combined force overwhelmed his advance. He was driven back to the broken ledge, his cloak snapping in the wind, while the storm nexus above them steadied just enough to keep Stonehaven from falling apart. Yet even as the room calmed, no one believed the danger was gone. Damien had not been defeated fully, only checked, and his eyes showed that he had already begun to think of a new move. Astra looked at her friends, and she saw the change in them as clearly as her own. Queen Evelyn no longer looked like a ruler hiding behind silence. Captain Nora no longer looked like a guard trapped between orders and truth. Myra no longer looked ashamed of her own gift. Even Leo, Chloe, Max, and Vance had become more than their roles as champions because they had learned to trust one another in the middle of real fear. Astra understood that this was what strength truly meant. It was not standing above everyone else. It was standing with them, carrying the weight together, and letting the whole group become larger than any one person. Above them, the storm nexus still glowed with restless power, and below them, Lantern Ward still waited in fear, but the city had shifted. Hope was still fragile, yet it was real. Damien watched from the broken edge of Bell's spire, already planning his next strike, while Astra turned toward the upper stairs with the others beside her, ready to face the next danger that the storm would bring. High above the clouds, Stonehaven glowed with tense light while Lantern Ward waited below in fearful silence. The repaired royal crown rested in Astra hand, and its final hidden channel now pulsed like a warning. Everyone understood the danger at once, because if that channel opened fully, the storm nexus could pull the whole empire out of balance. Queen Evelyn stood beside Astra, her silver hair shining under cold blue light, and her worried face showed the weight of every life in the city. Leo leaned forward with red hair bright as fire, ready to charge. Chloe kept her white hair still and her eyes sharp. Max bounced on his heels with blonde hair lit by sparks. Vance watched in silence, his black hair and gray eyes full of doubt. Myra held her dark brown hair back, afraid of what her blood magic might wake. Captain Nora arrived with James and Sarah, and her steady voice brought the guards into a single line. Then Damien appeared on the far bridge near Bell Spire, his black hair slick under the dark storm glow, and his cold voice carried the truth he had hidden for too long. He had not only wanted control. He had believed Stonehaven would fall without a single ruler strong enough to force order, so he had built every disaster to prove his point. Astra saw the final twist in that moment. Damien had used fear, but he had also been feeding the crown's secret energy from the tower, hoping the city would beg for his rule. The Empire had been a test to him, not a home. Astra stepped forward, calm and clear, and she finally understood her own change. She was no longer only a fighter who reacted fast. She was a protector who could choose for others without ruling over them. She lifted the crown channel toward the storm nexus, and the hidden path opened into light instead of ruin. Leo, Chloe, Max, Vance, and Myra all lent their power in a single united surge, while Queen Evelyn spoke the old binding words with Captain Nora beside her. Damien tried one last push, but the storm turned against his control and forced him back. When the light faded, the storm nexus steadied, and Stonehaven drifted into calm air again. The people of Lantern Ward cheered from their windows, and Bell Spire rang its clear, safe sound across the city. Queen Evelyn kept her throne, but she shared her rule with truth, not fear. Astra looked over the Empire and knew the fight had changed her forever. She had saved Stonehaven, and she had helped give it a future built on trust.